A prehistoric group approaches the base of a cliff just before a heavy rainstorm. They have two choices. Cave A features a wide entrance, isn't very deep, and its floor is raised above the valley. Cave B has a narrow entrance, runs deep, is sheltered from the wind, and feels seemingly warm. Cave B looks like the perfect choice at first glance. Rain can barely get in, darkness hides the camp, and there's only one entrance to guard. The group steps into Cave B and lights a fire. But the smoke doesn't go out. It rolls along the ceiling and slowly descends, blanketing the living space. At the same time, outside, water begins rushing through the cracks above the entrance. Then comes a chilling sound. A small rock falls from the ceiling. Why can a shelter that looks absolutely ideal from the surface turn into the deadliest trap when night falls? A cave isn't safe just because it has a roof. It's only safe when everything under that roof still has a way out. When we think of ancient caves, the surface-level question we usually ask is whether a bigger, deeper, or more enclosed cave is safer. But the real question lies in the ability to control the environment. Which way will the smoke escape? Where will the water rise when it pours upstream? Is the rock ceiling actually stable, or has it just not collapsed? How many escape routes are there? And who or what claimed this spot before humans walked in? To evaluate a shelter, we need 6 safety filters: the rock, roof, water flow, air, light and exits, animals, and spatial organization. We'll use Lazaret Cave to test smoke, Ranis Cave for competition with predators, Boila Rock Shelter for floods, Shanidar Cave for rockfalls, and Panga Yasaidi for a place humans trusted enough to return to for thousands of generations. First, we need to drop the word cave as if it describes only one type of dwelling. A shallow rock shelter and a deep underground system are two entirely different environments. Not all caves are the same. We can break them down into basic types. First is the rock shelter, an overhang mostly open to the outside. Second is the cave vestibule, the wide space right behind the entrance that still gets sunlight. Third is the deep chamber, where light and airflow drop drastically depending on the rock structure. Finally, we must distinguish between an active cave system, where water still flows and erodes, and a relict cave, where the water system has changed course. The first misconception is that deeper means warmer and safer. The deep zone does have a more stable temperature, but the trade-off is a total lack of natural light, requiring much more fuel to burn. Smoke struggles to escape, outside noises are hard to gauge, and a narrow passage can suddenly become a deadly choke point. Misconception 2. A single entrance is the easiest to defend. True, but it also means you have no alternative escape route. Smoke, floodwaters, and people all have to fight their way out through the exact same path. If falling rocks block the entrance, you are completely cut off. Or if a predator stands at the opening, it controls every life inside. Misconception 3. A dry cave floor today proves it never floods. At Boila Rock Shelter, flood sediments were found interlaced right between human occupation layers, showing that a site safely used by humans could be submerged in water at a different time. Misconception 4. An empty cave is an ownerless. Data from Ranis Cave shows a site could be alternately used by cave bears, hyenas, and humans. Species didn't necessarily have to be present and fighting at the same time to create a rift. If humans misjudged the change of seasons or the freshness of tracks, they walked right into a trap. Therefore, choosing a cave isn't choosing a physical object. It's predicting how rock, water, air, and animals will behave in the next few hours, or the next few months. The 6 filters determining if a cave is controllable begin with the rock roof. Risk signs include freshly fallen debris, ceiling slabs separating along cracks, or water seeping through an opening. There's no guarantee ancient humans could accurately predict a rockfall, but they could learn from repeating clues to avoid the area right beneath an unstable arc. At Shanidar Cave, rockfalls are significant enough to be proposed as the cause of death for several Neanderthal individuals. Filter 2 is water flow. A group had to distinguish between water merely dripping from the ceiling, water flowing across the floor, or a flash flood from the valley about to pour into the entrance. Signs could be fine mud clinging high on the walls, branches wedged in cracks, an eroded floor, or rounded pebbles that don't match the roof rock. At Boila Cave, hydrological processes interrupted the phases of human occupation. Filter 3 involves smoke and airflow. Fire creates heat, but it also weaves an invisible ceiling of smoke. A good hearth location had to balance several factors: close enough for warmth, far from flammable items, smoke drafting away from the breathing zone, not blocking the exit, and casting light exactly on the workspace. Simulation models at Lazaret Cave show the archaeological hearth was placed in an area that provided good working space while keeping smoke levels relatively low. A rock roof that blocks the wind can also block the very thing that needs to escape. Filter 4 covers light, visibility, and retreat route. The area near the entrance allows humans to spot approaching risks, use less fuel during the day, react quickly if the smoke changes direction, and retreat outside without stumbling through dark stretches. Deep zones require lighting equipment and strictly limit how humans operate due to temperature and humidity. Filter 5 is other living creatures. Looking for signs through fresh droppings, shed fur, gnawed bones, scratch marks on the walls, strong odors, or well-worn. At Rannis Cave, cave bears and hyenas left very clear traces, reflecting an alternating occupation of the cave rather than direct encounter. Filter 6 is spatial organization. A suitable cave must have enough room to separate the hearth, sleeping area, food processing spot, trash pile, and a clear walkway. However, an excessively massive space is very hard to heat, difficult to light, and has too many blind spots to monitor completely. And the final filter is time. Any inspection result is only true for a specific time frame. Is the cave safe before or after the rain? The dry season or the flood season? Before or during hibernation season? A safe cave is not a place. It is a place under the right conditions. These 6 filters explain the mechanism, while archaeological sites show how each filter actually left its mark. Lazaret Cave in France is the clearest evidence of a cave becoming safer, thanks to the placement of a single fire. Researchers built a 3D model, tested 16 hypothetical hearth locations, and simulated smoke dispersion. The results showed that the actual prehistoric hearth wasn't placed where it would provide the absolute maximum heating area. It was situated in a balanced zone, close enough to the activity area, creating a relatively large habitable space and avoiding subjecting most of the cave to high smoke levels. Safety didn't just come from finding a good cave, but from placing the fire correctly, placing the sleeping area correctly, letting the smoke vent properly, and avoiding turning a windbreak into a gas chamber. Next, what makes humans repeatedly return to a site? Panga ya Saidi Cave in Kenya records a chain of human activity spanning about 78,000 years. A place used by multiple generations shows it offered a combination of benefits. It was easily identifiable, had well-preserved space, and was situated usefully across different conditions. Returning repeatedly indicates humans could accumulate site knowledge. They knew which parts were usable, which seasons were suitable, and what resources were nearby. A good shelter didn't just save people for one night. It became a location others knew was worth checking again. But what happens when that cave already has other tenants? Ilsenhöhle at Rannis, Germany, contains evidence of early modern humans from about 45,000 years ago. However, bone and sedimentary DNA analysis indicates cave bears used the site to hibernate, and hyenas used it as a den. Human presence here fluctuated. A cave might be empty when a group sets foot in it, but it remains dangerous because the predator's denning season is about to start, or odors and tracks were misjudged. Safe knowledge requires a judgment of time. Is this footprint fresh or old, and what season is it currently? The cave entrance doesn't change. Only the owner changes. Sometimes, a shelter sits right in the path of water. Boila rock shelter in Greece identified slackwater flood sediments entering the rock shelter area, interstratified with prehistoric human occupation. A dry cave floor doesn't tell you how high the water will rise or when upstream rains will pour down. Floodwaters don't necessarily have to look like raging rapids sweeping people away. Slowly rising water is still incredibly dangerous if it soaks your fuel, cuts off your exit, induces hypothermia in sleeping people, or triggers mudslides. An old water line is the memory of the cave, even if the newcomers have never seen it. Finally, even a rock roof has a history of upheaval. Shanidar Cave is where Ralph Selecki once proposed that some Neanderthal individuals died from falling rock. Although newer studies have ruled this out for the Shanidar Z cluster, rockfalls remain a plausible hypothesis for other cases. At Chauvet Cave, the Paleolithic entrance gradually collapsed and was completely sealed off thousands of years after the main human activities inside. People didn't need to die for a roof collapse to become a lesson. Access routes can disappear, ventilation can change, and an open cave can be completely isolated. These sites don't create a fixed list of good and bad caves. They show that the same place can change its function when the hearth is moved, the season changes, the animals return, the water rises, or the roof continues to weather. We often assume that once a cave is inspected, a group can safely lower their guard. But a cave can change while they are sound asleep. In just a few hours, shifting winds can blow smoke back inside. Upstream rains raise groundwater levels. Softened ground causes small rocks to start falling. A good cave can absolutely become a bad cave because of how humans use it. If the group places the hearth too deep, burns fuel that creates too much smoke, piles trash near the sleeping area, attracting predators, or builds barricades right at the exit, they put themselves in danger. The deeper you go, the better the shelter, but simultaneously the less information you get from the outside. A deep cave reduces wind, rain, and noise, but it eliminates visibility, reduces the ability to detect weather changes, hides the sounds of approaching predators, and makes it impossible to know if smoke is venting or pooling. Shelter and awareness are always on opposite sides of a trade-off. A safe cave might only be a very small patch of space. In a large cave system, the entrance area might be suitable for living, but the adjacent corridor accumulates smoke, and the deeper chamber has an unstable rock. An entire cave shouldn't be judged by a single label. Therefore, a good escape route can be more important than a thick wall. At the entrance zone, humans can look outside. Natural light shines in, smoke has a chance to escape, and a threat doesn't require pushing through the entire group to reach the exit. When knowledge of a cave is passed down by word of mouth, it becomes a site with a safety record in the group's memory. This model explains how a cave becomes dangerous. But archaeology faces another problem. Sometimes the very process that killed people is the process that preserved the evidence for us. We need to be highly cautious. Rocks resting on a skeleton don't automatically represent the cause of death. Rocks could have fallen before the person arrived, right at the moment of death, or thousands of years later due to geological shifts. Shanidar Cave clearly illustrates that rockfall interpretations must be evaluated individually for each skeleton. Similarly, flood sediments don't prove people drowned. Water could have flooded the cave when the group had already left, or the current was only strong enough to carry fine mud. Boila Cave shows floods and occupation co-occurring, but it doesn't prove a devastating disaster for the inhabitants. Animal bones and human tools sharing the same layer could also belong to entirely different. If the soil is mixed, bear bones, hyena bones, and human tools will sit side by side without reflecting any direct confrontation. An optimal hearth location doesn't prove a perfectly calculated plan. It could be cumulative observation, trial and error, or the cave structure, leaving them no other choice. And the long occupation sequence at Panga Yasaidi doesn't mean the cave was always safe. A site with long-term value can still experience incredibly dangerous phases. Archaeology can identify roof collapses, water, smoke, and animals in a cave's history, but proving they directly injured a specific group is often much harder. Even though we can't reconstruct every accident, the criteria that made a shelter controllable are still very familiar in modern. Modern buildings are always evaluated by structural stability, drainage systems, ventilation, emergency exits, fire risks, and occupancy. These are the exact same systems of problems posed by a natural shelter, even though prehistoric humans didn't use technical jargon. A windowless room can feel secluded and safe, but it becomes extremely dangerous in the presence of smoke, a power outage, a blocked door, and overcrowding. A more open area seems less protected, but it allows for observation, rapid evacuation, good ventilation, and flexible spatial changes. Humans often judge safety by what blocks danger from getting in. But safety also depends on whether smoke, water, and humans themselves can get out. So, when returning to the two cave entrances at the beginning of our story, the right choice isn't the place that looks the most like a fortress. It's the place that has the fewest things that can change without the group noticing in time. The group left the deep cave after spotting soot stains on the low ceiling, old mud pooling at the base of the walls, fresh fallen rocks, and animal tracks near the corridor. They decided to choose the vestibule area of the wide cave. A raised floor, an observable vaulted roof, the fire placed where the smoke drafts out, the entrance unblocked by gear, and part of the group still able to see the sky out. The heavy rain pours down. The cave doesn't erase the storm. It just keeps the group from lying in the path of groundwater, suffocating smoke, and falling boulders. What makes a cave relatively safe is a combination of a stable roof, a floor out of the water's path, adequate ventilation for a fire, a living area that still gets light, clear escape routes, and few signs of occupying animals. A cave becomes deadly when its very ability to shelter traps smoke, water, rocks, or people inside. No cave is permanently safe. Seasons, weather, animal migrations, and rock structures can change faster than the group's memory. Humans didn't just passively seek out places nature had perfected for them. They chose the usable parts, placed the fire, separated the sleeping zone, monitored the water, read the animal tracks, and always kept a retreat route. A shelter is the joint product of geology and behavior. The safest cave was not the one that kept the world out. It was the one that still let danger and people get back out.